This is Frank Consella with the Crested Butte is Home podcast, and my guest this week is another amazing entrepreneur here in Crested Butte. He makes bikes, but not the two-wheel kind that you might be thinking of. He makes off-road Handcycles, which are really awesome machines that help him and other people get out into the backcountry, and it's a really cool story. So please welcome Jake O'Connor of Reactive Adaptations to the Crested Butte is Home podcast. Today on the Crested Butte is Home podcast, my guest is Jake O'Connor. So why don't you start by telling me a little bit about yourself and where you're from and all of that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, my name's Jake O'Connor. Lived in the Valley for about 10 or 12 years now. Been visiting the Valley for 20, 25 years. I'm from all over. Grew up in Colorado Springs area. Spent time in Denver. Went to school in Fort Collins and went to school down in Durango. Spent about 5 or 6 years out in Kansas City working, doing construction and whatnot. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's you. So from all over, you moved around a lot, or?
Well, I mean, mostly grew up in Colorado, but when I went to college, went up to Fort Collins and then moved out to Kansas City for about 5 or 6 years, and then moved back to Colorado, and then moved out to Salt Lake for a year and ski bummed, and then moved back, and now I'm in Crested Butte. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. So growing up, were you also, you just mentioned skiing. Were you into, biking? What else were you into as a kid growing up in Colorado?
Oh, I don't know, typical Colorado outdoor kid. I loved camping and hiking, and I never did ski until I actually came to Crested Butte in my late 20s. So I never had that much money, and neither did my parents, so we never went skiing. But I was mostly just a rock climbing kid. I enjoyed rock climbing, and that was my passion. And, backcountry hiking and stuff like that.
All right. So then you mentioned CSU and why Kansas City then? Because that seems like an odd move to make if you're into the outdoors to go that direction.
Yeah, I got my degree in construction management, and at that time, jobs were a little bit tough to get, and so they offered me a very good position as a project manager for a very large commercial construction company based in Kansas City. And so within the first year, that I got to build casinos, and in over 5 years, I got to build fire stations and parking lots and prisons and you name it. So I got a taste of everything.
Wow. Cool. What was your favorite type of building? Did you enjoy those big projects, or did you actually kind of prefer, residential or whatever?
They were cool. It's not often that they hand you $7 or $8 million and they say, go build this fire station in 11 months and try and get it under budget and try and get it done in time. And if you don't, you're in a lot of trouble. And it's like, well, all right, let's go. And so it was tough work. It was 50, 60, 70 hours a week and banging your head against the wall type work, and super stressful. But it was fun. I got to see some really cool stuff. Got to build the only floating casino in the world, and that was my first job. So it was pretty impressive.
When you say floating, so was there just like a boat that was like the frame that you built off top of, or how did that work?
So basically in Kansas City, it's evolved over the last, 50, 60, 70 years, however long they've had riverboats. But they used to have riverboats, and obviously they would run the riverboats up and down the river. And then over time, the Gaming Commission said, well, you don't have to run them up and down the river. They just need to be floating on the river. And then over time, they said, well, they don't have to be floating on the river. They just need to be floating near the river. So they had them parked in a mud puddle by the river. And then the Gaming Commission said, well, they don't need to be really even floating on the river. They just need to be floating. So we built a 1 acre, basically it was 1 acre floor plan. And if you can envision like a 52 hole it's kind of like I'm drawing a blank right now, but basically a floating concrete floor with about 52 airbags underneath it, all controlled by a computer. And so the floor was floating and the rest of the building was secured to the ground. And so basically that's all the gaming commission required after a while, was just a floating floor. And so that's what we built. We have the only 1 acre of floating concrete floor.
No, that makes sense. I guess it's kind of humorous, but I guess whatever worked. So
totally ridiculous, man. Totally ridiculous. But whatever they say, you do. So
right.
That's what we built.
So eventually you moved back to Colorado. Why'd you move back, and where'd you end up?
I got kind of sick and tired of the construction management industry. It kind of burned me out a little bit. Kind of got sick and tired of working for 8 different bosses. And so I asked them to move back to Colorado where they had a branch. And they said, well, on the way, will you go build a couple of prisons? And so I kind of did. And then got really burnt out and said, you know what, I'm kind of tired of this. So I started remodeling houses. And then I got tired of that a little bit and decided to move to Salt Lake City and ski bum a little while and take some time off and get my brain back into the game. And so I spent about a year in Salt Lake and snowed the bird and enjoyed that, and kind of managed a bike shop part-time. And then decided that Salt Lake probably wasn't the correct town for me to be in. The outdoor life is pretty amazing, but some of the residents weren't really super agreeable, I guess you could say. And so I was like, you know what? I'm always visiting Crested Butte. I always go on vacation to Crested Butte. I have friends there, and the adaptive sports center's there. Why don't I just move there? And so I did. I said, screw it, and couch surfed on some friends' spare bedroom bed for about a month, and then finally found an apartment that I could fit into, and the rest is history. I haven't left since.
In the Crested Butte Real Estate Minute, I could describe it in one word, and that word is busy. That's one reason it's been so long since I've been able to release a podcast. Sorry about that. But it's been really busy, not just for me and in real estate, but it's also been really busy for many of the people I've been trying to interview, which is another reason it's been hard for me to get one out recently. As far as the busyness, we're seeing a lot of what I just heard for the first time were called Zoom buyers. So they are either able to work from home permanently or just work from home a lot. And in either of those cases, that makes them think that maybe Crested Butte is a great spot to spend either a lot more time or to move permanently. Sellers, the inventory is very low right now, so it's a great time to sell. Buyers can still take advantage of the super low interest rates that we're seeing too. So it's actually still a good time to buy or to sell. My name is Frank Consella. My website is CrestedButteRealEstateAgent.com. You can go there and contact me or sign up for my monthly market report newsletter. And let's get back to the interview.
I want to talk about what you do now is build bikes. But how did that start? And I guess why did that start?
Well, when I moved to Crested Butte, I didn't obviously have a job, and the construction market had tanked. It was about 2008. And so I wasn't able to actually find any construction management jobs in Crested Butte. And so I was dividing my time between Crested Butte and ski bumming here and living down in Canyon City and remodeling houses down there to kind of make ends meet. And during that time, I approached a local welder with some of my Handcycle designs that I had come up with. I had been off-road handcycling for several years prior using one of my competitors' bikes, or predecessors' bikes, more accurately. But I kind of wanted a better bike that would do more stuff and nastier terrain and single track and all that stuff. So I had a drafting background and an AutoCAD background, so I put together a lot of drawings, and I approached a local welder here in town and said, hey, man, what do you think? Do you think we could build something like this? And he was, I think work was a little slow for him, and he was really intrigued by the project. So he said, yeah, sure, let's throw some tubing together and see how this works. And you know what, it all worked out, and the design was pretty killer, and we made some modifications, and a few of my friends who had my predecessor's bike as well saw my bike and said, man, you got to build me one of those. And so the rest is history. I mean, I didn't have to get a real job after that. I just started building bikes.
Gotcha. Well, I guess we should back up a little bit. So why these bikes, and what happened with your health in order?
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah.
No, and I should have asked the question better. That was me.
So back in 2001, I was framing houses up near Fort Collins for a high-end home contractor. And that's actually what I grew up doing, is framing houses and doing carpentry and painting and whatnot. So as an internship for construction management, I was actually working as a foreman / project manager for that small company up in Fort Collins, and I was helping one of their framing crews erect a wall one day, and we weren't able to get it up, and the wall came back down on top of me and broke my lower back, and I have a spinal cord injury because of it. And so I've been in a wheelchair for about 19 years now. And so that is, to answer your question, why I'm in an off-road hand cycle. So cannot use anything from the belt line down.
So this was actually, you were still in school? This is an internship? So this is prior to moving to Kansas City and everything, is that correct?
Yeah, okay. You're right. So yeah,
Okay.
I got hurt in about 2001 and spent about 5 weeks in the hospital, 5-6 weeks in the hospital, and got out of there as fast as I possibly could, and went back up to college and graduated about a semester and a half later. Got a job with that construction company in Kansas City, and moved out to Kansas City, and was basically working 60, 70 hours a week, 11 months after my injury. So I kind of got back to it as fast as I could.
Wow, that's great. Okay, so you mentioned why Reactive Adaptations started. The bike that you were using, you thought you could build a better one? Is that the basic idea?
Yeah, so the predecessor to my bike was basically called the One-Off Flyer. It was made by a gentleman named Mike Augsburger in Western Massachusetts, and he is actually the former owner of Merlin Bikes, which is one of the original titanium bike companies out there, and he sold that off and started building these adaptive bikes, and they were freaking awesome. He built, 300 or 400 of them total, and they were the only thing out there that was capable of doing pretty nasty terrain. But they had little 20-inch wheels, and they had some issues here and there, and I owned 2 of them and broke the frames on both of them multiple times and repaired them, and I just finally said, maybe these things need a little bit of rear suspension, and I think the steering could be a little bit better and whatnot. So I actually approached Mike, and I asked him if he'd build me a custom bike, and he said he wasn't really interested. And so I told him, I said, hey, I think I'm going to try and, build one of these myself. And I think I heard him chuckle a little bit. And now I know why he chuckles, because they're really difficult to build. But yeah, I built one and fell in love with it. And, over the last 10, 11 years have made them better and better each generation.
And you mentioned before, so you had some background with the drawing, but obviously this is a little bit different, because you've got shocks, you've got moving pieces, so how did you decide on the design? Was it just kind of taking what was there and some ideas in your head that would make it better? Or how?
Yeah. So roughly speaking, I guess that my first bike design was fairly close to Mike Augsburger's One-Off design, but then I added, rear suspension. I added, bigger wheels and tires, and a totally different steering system. Excuse me, and it just sort of evolved. Over a couple of months. I would tear something off and put it back on, and the first bike was pretty freaking ugly. We called it the Frankenbomber, because it was just hacked apart and put back together, and hacked apart and put back together, and then Chad, who was the local welder that I had approached, built one for himself, and we were taking him out, and he's an able-bodied guy, and he was enjoying riding him more than his 2-wheeled bike. And so, over the course of a year or two, we just totally demolished these bikes and tore them apart and made them better. And yeah, now you have 10 years later, I think I have a pretty solid design, and now I have 5 other types of bikes that I build as well, 5 other designs for, different types of riders or different levels of disability and stuff like that. So the product's really evolved, and it's taken a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
I was going to ask about that with the different types of disabilities. Are these almost each custom based off? Because I know my wife was hurt last summer, and it's kind of crazy. I mean, she hurt C5, which meant numbness in her left arm, which I had no idea that it's that dependent where a spinal injury might affect you. But so are these all one-offs, or are they generally kind of the same?
Well, I've had to come up with several different types of designs. So basically the bike that I prefer is called the Bomber, which is a kneeling type handcycle. And you actually face downward and you use your chest to steer, and it requires a whole lot of core strength in order to make that bike work well. But it does not work well for higher level injuries like quadriplegics and higher level paraplegics. They just cannot ride that style of bike. So I've had to develop a completely different type of bike for their needs. And so we call that one the Nuke. And it's more of a recumbent style where your feet are out in front of you. It's way more comfortable. It doesn't require as much core strength or as much upper body strength in order to use that type of bike. And so that's actually my best selling bike right now, is that type of bike, not even the bike that I first developed.
When you're I just want to keep sticking with the design a little bit because I think it's interesting, but are you drawing some of your design inspiration from, two-wheeled bikes or ATVs or snowmobiles, or just all like from your own designs and kind of trying to innovate and make them better?
I try and incorporate as much of the two-wheeled bike technology as I can, maybe suspension. And obviously I'm trying to use the same parts and pieces that you guys use on your bikes, so my bikes can be serviced by any bike shop in the world. But as far as design goes, these are kind of unique. They really don't mimic a two-wheeled bike per se, I guess you could say. They don't mimic a motorcycle or a quad or a razor or anything like that. They're kind of their own genre, I guess. And so we've had to do a lot of imaginative things to make them work.
How is it, because you fabricate these as well, have you grown to like welding? How does that compare to, framing houses that you used to do and that kind of thing? I'm just curious what that's like.
Yeah, actually, I love welding. I love all the steel fabrication. And when I moved to town, I didn't really have any experience with metal fabrication or welding or anything like that. And Chad kind of took me under his wing, showed me the basics, this is a grinder, this is how you do this stuff, this is how you weld. And he showed me the basics, and then I just sort of caught on really fast and, learned a lot of the stuff on my own and asking other guys and watching YouTube and bouncing questions off of other frame builders that I knew. And then there was a whole lot of school hard knocks, screwing a whole bunch of stuff up, stabbing yourself with a welder, you name it. I've done it. I've screwed everything up that you possibly can on one of these bikes, but it probably makes me a better bike builder because of it.
And are these all steel then in general, all your designs, or aluminum, or?
Most of it's lightweight chromoly steel.
Okay.
But I am doing a lot more aluminum welding and aluminum fabrication. I'm not super high on the aluminum stuff. It requires some heat treating processes that aren't super readily available in our valley or even our state. Whereas chromoly is a very strong material. It's easy to work with. It doesn't require as much heat treating, and really stands up to the brutality that these bikes go through.
So how much do these weigh, like, especially compared to like a two-wheel bike anyway?
So our Bomber, like for instance, is about 50 pounds, and that's with like I said, a chromoly frame and a seat and 2 knee trays and 3 wheels, 3 disc brakes, 3 headsets, and a whole lot of frame. I mean, it's a big frame. It's a whole lot bigger than a 2-wheeled bike frame.
Yeah.
That it's got rear suspension, so it's got a pretty beefy swing arm on the rear, and a mile of chain, which doesn't help. So, but that's the basic bomber is about 51 pounds. And then most of these bikes, I'd say 9 out of 10 of these bikes that I'm building right now is getting some form of Eassist system on there. And so that adds another 17, 18 pounds right there. So after a while, especially with my full suspension bikes that I'm now building, the weight's getting pretty high up there, with Eassist and full suspension, we're upwards of 75 to 80 pounds.
Fair enough, although I'm sure that that 17, 18 pounds of the Eassist is well worth it. I mean, obviously our arms are not as strong as our legs, so it's, I've got to imagine that's needed, or at least a whole lot easier that way.
It's a huge game changer. I mean, I've been installing Eassist systems on these bikes for about 8 or 9 years now. And every year they get better and better and lighter and more efficient, more powerful and whatnot. And, for me, I resisted for a number of years. I was, like I said, installing them for 8 or 9 years now, but I didn't start riding with an Eassist until about, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe just 4 years ago. But my wife finally said, enough, you've done all the trails that you can around here. And it's time for you to start riding some of the bigger trails that you couldn't get to without a motor. I mean, most of our trailheads out here start 5 or 6 miles away, it seems like.
Yeah.
And so by the time I got to the trailhead, I was taxed already.
I'm sure.
So now with the Eassist motor, it's a pedal assist motor that we put on there. I can do some of the bigger rides that the rest of the locals are doing. Now I can pedal up from Dead Man's parking lot all the way up Reno to Reno Ridge and down Dead Man's again. And whereas that would have been a really, really hard taxing ride on my body pre-motor, but now I can do that ride in 3 or 4 hours, and I can almost keep up with my wife, who's a really good mountain biker. And so it's really opened up a lot of doors for me, and it's really opened up doors for my customers. I mean, especially the customers that are quadriplegics or have some sort of upper body disability where they don't have as much strength as I do. The Eassist is mandatory. Without it, they wouldn't be doing the rides that they are. They would only be doing 2 or 3 mile rides, and they'd be super taxed. Now they're doing 20-mile rides with their families and stuff. So
that's awesome.
It's something that we have to have, and it's pretty awesome.
So what are the rules? I mean, are you allowed to go anywhere that any other e-bike goes, or what's the deal with that?
Well, that could be a whole nother podcast right there. Okay. So the rules as it applies to someone with a disability are somewhat gray right now. Most would say that we are allowed on anything that we want to be on. Others would say that is not true. I think that if you asked most Forest Service or BLM rangers out there and they caught me on the trail with my Eassist and a Handcycle, they would probably just look the other direction and politely walk away. They probably don't have a problem with it. But I think there are others out there that don't see that as being kosher, and they don't want to see any Eassist out there. And I understand that. If you get someone with a 2-wheeled bike that has Eassist and they're not allowed on the trails, but they see me and I'm allowed on the trails, then they're gonna think that's unfair. Most people would say, screw that. I should be allowed to ride the trails with Eassist, because without Eassist, I wouldn't be able to do Dead Man's and stuff like that, like I mentioned before. So it's a very gray area. I'm involved in a lot of discussions between the BLM and the Forest Service nationally. They invite me out commonly to Denver to their big conventions that they have to discuss my bikes and to discuss the Eassist issue. For the most part, they're all for it. They don't have a problem with it. It's mostly the local offices that dictate the policy.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, Moab is still not happy with us being out there with Eassist on their non-motorized trails. Whereas the local Gunnison BLM, they don't seem to have a problem. In fact, they've been nothing but inviting and awesome. The local Gunnison BLM and Gunnison Trails, those guys are just top notch. They do everything they can to support the Handcycle groups, and they don't seem to have problems with the Eassist or anything like that. So I don't know. You just kind of have to feel out each area, I guess, and be polite and, not destroy the trails or cause a ruckus.
Yeah.
That's a deep subject.
Well, let's. What are some of your favorite trails, just out of curiosity, locally?
Since I live down in CV South, I just the easiest trail for me to pop onto is just to blast up Walrod Road and connect with Warm Springs and just do a quick loop back home. That's my go-to after work type ride, and Warm Springs isn't like epic or anything like that, but it's fun and easily doable on a Handcycle. But I try and do most of the trails around here, the same ones you guys do. I mean, obviously, I've never got to do 401. I don't think I'll ever be able to do 401. I'm not sure I want to do 401.
Mm-hmm.
I hear that there's a lot of traffic on it, and I'd probably get in the way and yada, yada, yada. So I just steer clear of those. But yeah, I try and, I do all the same trails you guys do. I do all the trails on the mountain for the most part, upper loop, lower loop, upper, Whetstone Vista. I think my wife and I love to do Strand. We do Strand a couple times a year, and
Nice.
Bonus and Canal and all that stuff. Ferris and all that. My wife finally pushed me up Walrod, the wall part of Walrod, and got me onto some of that single track that's above the wall, which I'm not familiar with at all. And that was pretty epic. So once we got past the wall, I had a great time, and it's so gorgeous back there. So unfortunately we had to turn back early to get back home to relieve the babysitter. But we are planning on trying to get back up there and see how much more of the trails I can get, up on top of Double Top and all that stuff. So
nice, really cool.
Yeah, we're really psyched about that. And fortunately or unfortunately, we have a 21-month-old infant, so baby girl. So our time is very limited as far as mountain biking, but we're trying to get out as much as we can and do the trails that I've never seen before. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, the wall, I'm not sure when they did it, but they cleaned it up a lot. I don't know when you got up there last, but this summer it was a totally different deal. Like most of all those little baby head rocks were actually gone. So it might be even better if you get back out there this summer.
Nice.
But, yeah. You mentioned it really briefly quite a while ago that Adaptive Sports Center had at least a little bit of a part with you moving to Crested Butte. So what's talk about the Adaptive Sports Center and what your relationship is like with them and what they do with your bikes there.
Right. So they're a huge supporter of my company. They've bought, I don't even know how many of my bikes now. And so I've been friends with those guys for, I don't know, 15, 16, 17, 18 years now. And they taught me how to ski. And they were a major reason why I decided to move to this valley, mostly because I knew a lot of the instructors, and a lot of the instructors became my personal close friends. So I was like, what the hell, I'm going to move here and take advantage of them. And I already have a friend structure sort of in place, and, a good support structure. And those guys are awesome, man. They're top notch. I don't hang out with them as much as I used to now that I've got a family and a small business that sort of takes most of my time. And a lot of the older instructors that were there when I first started going there aren't there anymore, but they're still an awesome program. They're still one of the best run adaptive programs in the entire nation. And like I said, they support the hell out of me. They've probably 6, 7 of my bikes now, and it seems like every year they come up with the money to buy yet another one of my bikes or support me somehow. So, I try and, when I have time, volunteer for their ski program. And if they ask me to come out on the mountain and go ski with a newbie or whatever, I try and do the best I can to show up with my monoski and, show them a few things, that we can do, and show them what's possible, and, point at head wall and say, yeah, I ski that and you will someday too. And that sort of inspires some of the, newer skiers to think that they can, do anything.
That's awesome. I was going to ask that about the bike too. I mean, do you get to go out with some of these guys on a bike and show them what they can aspire to on that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they asked me to show up on my bike sometimes, and for the summer lessons and whatnot, and kind of show off and, show them what's possible. And I show them the trails that I do, and they're like, no way, there's no way I can do that trail. And I'm like, well, once I couldn't do that either, but now I can. So, give it time, and, it takes a while to figure out how these bikes work. But so I try and help the Adaptive Sports Center out as much as I can. It's not nearly as much as I'd like, but, we're all busy, I guess.
What do you, I'm just coming up with this question on the fly. What do you think is the most rewarding part? Getting to go out on your bikes yourself, or looking at this thing that you've built yourself, or watching someone on this thing that you built?
Oh, it's definitely watching other people ride the equipment that I build.
Yeah.
And every once in a while I get an email from somebody that says, God, I cried today because I haven't done anything like this since I got hurt. I just had 3 girls come up from Boulder, 3 girls and 1 guy come up from Boulder, and we're like, we're coming up and you're showing us some epic rides up there. And they all ride one of my bikes. And I was like, okay, I'll take the day off for that. And while I was riding, one of the girls who had just been hurt maybe 2 or 3 years ago was looking at me, and she's like, I cried the other day because this was the best thing that's ever happened to me since I've been hurt. And without this bike, I would be lost. I may not even be here right now. And it's just opened up so many doors for me, and on and on and on. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. And, sometimes I'm so stressed out and, pissed off at the bike industry and pissed off at a customer or something like that. And then I hear something like that, and I'm like, okay, all right, now I remember why I'm doing this,
Yeah.
And I get emails from a lot of customers like, man, I went out with my 2 sons today, and we haven't been able to hike with each other for 5 years. And we went out and did a 10-mile hike, and I was on my off-road Handcycle, and I went fishing and did these things. You're like, oh, well, that's just totally rad, But, sometimes I don't get an email from any of my customers because they're too busy out, enjoying the bikes. And they're like, I don't need to talk to anybody anymore. It's made them more independent, and that's fine too. I don't need to hear from my customers as long as they're happy and the bike is in one piece. Then good on them,
Yeah. Well, it's like you said, it's got to feel good every once in a while to get a reminder of why you're doing what you're doing, and the headaches that come with owning any business. So very cool. You talked about skiing a little bit. Do you do those designs too, or are you just using other people's sit skis?
For a number of years, I used everybody else's sit skis, and then, of course, like my wife likes to say, I hate using other people's equipment now that I build my own. And so, of course, I had to go out and build my own monoski. So I'm on my 4th generation of monoski that I built myself, and I love it. Yeah, but I don't build them for anybody else right now. I've been asked to, but I'm just so bogged down with bike orders right now that it seems impossible to start a totally different product line. And there are a ton of good monoski manufacturers out there right now, so the market's pretty competitive. I would like to get into the super lightweight type monoskiing instead of the racing type, because our mountain here at Crested Butte sort of requires me to do a lot of traversing and stuff like that. And so when I was skiing some of the other people's heavier rigs, it was, it was a bitch turning that thing down peel and funnel and headwall and all that stuff. Having a 40-pound piece of steel underneath your butt, is really difficult when you're skiing the steeps. So I started building my own, and I'm about down to about 20 to 22 pounds of weight, which is pretty awesome. So maybe someday I'll start building them, but right now I just don't have the time.
Yeah, sounds like you're busy enough. So how many ski builders are there, and how many bike builders? Do you have a rough idea?
Ski builders, man, they seem to be popping up left and right. I would say there's 5 or 6 main really good ski builders, and they all build a really high-end quality product, but they're mostly directed towards ski racing. And so their rigs are super high performance suspension, very burly, very heavy, but durable for the most part. And then as far as bicycle manufacturers, I would say that there's 3 or 4 of us main players. My main competitor is located in Poland, actually, and he builds a very nice product. Another one of my competitors is located out in Las Vegas. His bike designs are a little bit different than mine, but he still sells the hell out of them. And there are a few others that are popping up here and there, but there's like 3 or 4 of us main guys out there.
Well, where can people learn more about your business?
My website is reactiveadaptations.com. And then I'm also got Reactive Adaptations on Instagram and Reactive Adaptations on the old F book. And I don't really do Twitter or anything like that. But all the information for all my product is on my website. And then I post most of my pictures and stuff like that on Facebook and Instagram.
Well, Crested Butte is home for you, so why do you still choose to make Crested Butte your home?
Well, that's a good question. It's getting tougher and tougher these days, it seems like, with the things have really changed in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So when I first moved here, it was a lot different than now. But I still love it here. I go to Denver and realize, gosh, Crested Butte is pretty awesome still. I'm not a big city fan and never will be. So I still like the smallness of Crested Butte, and I still think it's a good place to live. It's getting a little bit more congested, but compared to other places, it seems like everything's getting more congested. So we have nothing to complain about, I think, here. I think we still have an awesome town. Still, the locals are still very awesome, and I still love being here. It's gorgeous here, and I don't know where else I'd live right now.
Anything else I should have asked that I just didn't know to ask, or you want to talk about or anything?
Not really.
Okay. Fair enough. And then final question that I always ask is who else I should interview in the Crested Butte kind of scenario?
There's so many people that have helped me with this business. It's kind of hard to pin down just one person. I've got so many supporters, but I mean, anybody that's been at the Adaptive Sports Center for a long time, like, the Chris Reed or Chris Hensleys out there, they all know me so well and have been around me so long that, they know more about me than I do, I think. And, I've got good friends like Craig Maestro, who used to own Eassist, that loves to ride these Handcycles. And every time he sees someone on the street, it seems like he's talking to them about my Handcycles. Or if he ever sees anybody in a wheelchair, he's always trying to be the salesman, throws a salesman hat on there and tries to sell them one of my bikes. So everybody's been super supportive in the community of my business. And it's really hard to pin down just one person to have you talk to.
That's fair. Yeah, those all work. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking some time from building bikes and riding bikes to chat with me. I appreciate it a bunch, and hopefully I'll just run into you on a trail someday.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Crested Butte's Home podcast. All the episodes can be found at crestedbutteshome.com, or you can also subscribe on your favorite podcast player and also leave a review if you're so inclined. I always appreciate those. You can find my contact information and Crested Butte and Gunnison real estate information also at crestedbutteshome.com. So this is Frank Consella, and again, thanks for listening, and hopefully I'll get another episode out real soon. I'll see you then.